Well, good morning, Shelter family. How's it going? It's Pastor Jay here for your Monday, May 11th, 6 at 6. I want to reiterate just a happy Mother's Day to all of our mothers at the church. We are so blessed. We say it, wouldn't be here without you, and we mean it. Moms, we hope that you felt honored and loved and cherished during this Mother's Day. As you know, we've been going in through this concept over the last few weeks about a question to you is it living? Is your spiritual walk actually have evidences of living? And there's multiple components to it. That Miss Grin that Chris introduced a few weeks back. We've talked about in the first week with the idea of movement, that every living thing must be moving for it to be alive. Last week we focused a lot on growth. We actually had a lot of illustrations about trees and different things like that. And this week we're going to introduce this idea about reproduction, that every living thing, to determine if it's alive, must reproduce. And I think it's a beautiful concept and a beautiful marriage actually with Scripture, because we see in Galatians 6 where, of course, the concept of what a man sows, he's going to reap, right? A living thing only reproduces after its kind. An apple tree does not produce oranges. What we sow is what we reap, and we actually believe in that from a faith framework, right? When we put a seed into the ground, we don't make it grow, as I mentioned on Friday, right? It grows because of the faith and because of the supernatural work of God, right? And so this idea that something must grow, we have to also understand that with reproduction, it requires seed. In various different formats, seed to be sown intentionally. And by the way, many organisms, if not all, must get to a certain place of maturity in their life cycle for them to actually produce seed. So we're using this analogy, right, with is it living, and we're seeing how this is applying to us, right? We can't reproduce something in someone else until it's owned by us, until it's matured and fully grown. And so what I want you to think about with this is the idea of the sower. Because one thing I think when it comes to Christianity, and I imagine that many of you agree as I'm talking here, is that sometimes I feel like when we're trying to reproduce faith in other people, we find ourselves sometimes, because of worry from what someone would say or how we might fumble with some of the knowledge that we have, we find ourselves casually going about it. But I want you to see something really, really cool and clear in the parable of the sower that was really jumped out at me. It says this in Matthew chapter 13, that a farmer went out to sow seed. But I want you to hear these words. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. And still other seed fell on good soil. What I want you to see is this word scattered and fell. To me, those are very unintentional thoughts. You know, when it comes to sharing your faith, I can't stress enough, for your faith to be reproduced in someone else, there must be intent behind it. There must be something that you own and that you actually look for the time and the proper soil of the person's heart to actually intentionally sow faith into them. Now that can sound for many of you maybe like there's some manipulation behind that. I look at it a completely different way. I've said this many times before I go into any type of meeting or any type of interaction with somebody, I'll always take time beforehand to ask the Lord to open up the heart and to give me wisdom so that faith might be sown, and what? If it's sown, it will be reproduced. So this is not just with our words. When we think about sharing our faith, I think so many times we kind of box it into just our words. But how many of you are actually intentional with your actions? I think this is where the challenge this week must start when we're talking about reproduction of our faith, right? Are you intentional with your actions? with the different crowds that you're around, with the different family members? Have you actually thought through the different scenarios that might happen within any social setting? I believe so often Christians find themselves on their back foot, so to speak, when it comes to sharing their faith and reproducing their faith. I believe that we must be extremely intentional and focused if we want seed to actually be sown in. Again, when we saw this parable of the sower, what we see is words like scattered. Again, take this analogy for a moment. When you're in the room with somebody, when you're in a setting where you know your faith is supposed to be shared, are you intentionally sowing it? Are you just hoping that you'll throw something up against the wall without conviction, without passion, without love, and thinking it will stick? This is what I want you to think about when we're talking about the reproduction of your faith. It is an important point and concept to Is It Living. I love you guys. I'm so grateful for you sharing these messages, and I'm hopeful that they're inspirational for you. Hey, we're getting through COVID-19 together. I love you guys, and I look to see you later on this week.